So hopefully everyone can see my screen. And first of all, my name is Buzz Leifer, and the session this afternoon is to talk about utilization and ROI. And when I think about utilization and ROI, I think of it as being broader than just job site utilization. I think of it as total asset utilization. And obviously, anytime you're managing your equipment fleet, utilization is one of those key elements that you need to be thinking about. Measuring time and dollar utilization of your fleet is absolutely critical in getting the best performance out of your assets. Acquisitions, asset maintenance, and disposals are even a key part of this. There's many examples that I could give you of companies that have assets where their utilization tools have not been used properly, and being able to use telematics to help them manage that fleet has really helped them get a grip on what's going on with their assets. Some of the things that you should be thinking about is at a high level is when you think about best practices for equipment management, calculating, the time of usage versus the time of available usage. An example here, a couple different examples, whether you're an operator or whether you're job costing in your fleet, or whether you're using rental equipment. Obviously, anytime you're thinking about assets and utilization and optimization, you're thinking about, what is my cost out and what is my cost in. You're thinking about examples of, how many days do I have available to use and how many days that I've used. I've put a couple of examples in here of, some real simple ways to, manage that performance. So for an example, on 200 days used at 365 days a year, you got a 55% time utilization. The key is trying to make it simple, and when you're trying to make it simple, you just want to try to understand, what are you trying to capture? Are you trying to know on a job site assets that are moving in and out of a job site? Obviously, the telematics control unit on that asset gives you the ability to know, what the engine hours are, and being able to alert on in and out, being able to alert on usage, and being able to alert on, when a piece of equipment is not operating at its optimum. But being able to put some real hard numbers around those things really begins to mean something when you look at a period of time in a job site. So there's a couple of examples there, but I think the takeaway that hopefully I can show you here in this demonstration of how our tools can help you do that, help you manage these metrics and track these metrics, I think will be valuable for you. Some good things to know when you think about equipment and utilization. Obviously, knowing where your assets are, knowing which ones are working, which ones are not, understanding, how to balance the load. Oftentimes you find companies that might have varying piece of equipment that their equipment might be the same make, year, and model, and one of those assets they've essentially worn it out, and the other asset is not being used. Is that a good balance or not? These tools help you to manage that balance. It helps you to know when to liquidate an asset, helps you know, what the performance is. So it's more than just what's going on in the job site itself. Obviously, when you're thinking about a job site, some of the key things to understand is exactly what's going on within that perimeter of the job site. But the bigger picture is looking at where those capital dollars are and trying to understand how you put those capital dollars to work in other areas. So telematics really becomes the eyes for you. Here's a snapshot of an example of an effective utilization plan. You're setting up a geofence. You visually see what's happening. You can visually see what's happening inside the geofence. You have the capability of alerting on entry and exit. You can alert on, engine off time. The utilization this type of utilization will help you, put a frame around what the underperforming assets are. And one of those hidden things that, especially in organizations where you've got the guy that is a superintendent on a job site that tends to want to have that extra piece of equipment on the job site just because and just because is he's always had it that way and always used it, so he's hoarding equipment. He's holding equipment and using equipment that is valuable dollars that you could be using somewhere else. Some of the things you can do with that also is set up reports on these in and out exits, set up reports on these on and off times, and I'll show you some examples of how you can do that too. And then being able to get a snapshot look at reporting on the utilization. You can see here I've pulled an example here of a job site and summarize some job site hours. This particular project was in Illinois, and the company here was trying to capture, by project, the engine time, the run time, and they had also gone in and put in a billing rate and put in some billing amounts there so they can use that for potentially, back-end integration, or if needed be, one of the options in the solution is giving you the capability to export this data out and get another look at it. Not knowing what the background is on those that are attending today, but this little graphic here is kind of a snapshot of what I'd like to, share in discussion. And it really just kind of crystallizes for those that, have familiarity or those that don't have familiarity, how the TeMeDa solution is, put together and how we make all this stuff happen for you. If you think about all your different types of equipment on the left side, and then you look at those many types of devices, they could be any types of, telematic control units, or it could be, a Vision Link feed or a JD Link feed or some other feed that we're pulling into the solution itself. And obviously in the center there, stack there, you'll see the TeMeDa stack. And that's the platform where all this magic takes place. It's our mapping services, our API services, and translation services. This is where we pull all this together and expose it out into the application. So your application that you're looking at in the TeMeDa application, you can see on the right-hand side, you could see it in, varying different places. You could see it in either, a desktop view, a laptop, or a mobile application. Or in some cases, you could see it in an optional, additional optional interface. Or if you're working in, a larger customer that might have a need to integrate that data or push that data to another application for utilization, you can do that as well. The other thing that I find around the construction space oftentimes is companies, and especially in mid-tier companies, they're using, construction companies are using tools like, Viewpoint as an example. And one of the things that, often been told in customers that are using viewpoint tools is that, well, it does a lot of this stuff very, very well, but it's something that doesn't do so well. And it, what we've been able to do is do some integrations to those back ends to, make available the data elements, because that's what we do best, is collecting that data and exposing that data up and serving that data in a way that, you can potentially use it in those applications. And you can also potentially bring some of the viewpoint data in their application. So those are discussions. If you get into those scenarios, I'm happy to talk further with you, and we can set up some time and help you through some of those discussions. I'm going to skip over to if you'll bear with me one second here. I have a, I've already opened up a live application here, and in the live application, I pulled up a customer that uses this type of utilization tool and uses it very, very well. And also, this is a customer that has also used, has done some integrations with some other services too. So they're taking some of that other data and pushing it over. So just at a high level here, when you look at the application itself and you go into the application, you can see there's a couple different viewing modes, and I'll walk you through some of this, so any of those that are on the call that might not be familiar with the application, how the easiest way to get to some of these tools. But you can see different views of how you can look at the application. You can see grid mode only, you can see map and grid, or depending on how you want to look at it. There's a drop down here on the top, and the ribbon across the top gives you places where you can go in and build, schedule, and run reports. You can look at different alerting and set up alerts and set up notifications. You can set up maintenance. And there's a very robust maintenance engine built within the application that comes in quite handy when you're talking about looking at entire fleets and optimization across entire fleets. This asset list here, this is where there's some real depth in understanding, what the assets are, and looking at asset dashboards. The administration button here is one that's very important to you if you're trying to make access to an individual to be able to have certain roles and rights. So this is where you really turn on and turn off users for using the application. And it's also where you go in and set up, projects, and you can set up geofences and set up locations of how you want to look at any of these users. And it's important when you go in and set up a user application itself for optimization. Down on the bottom over here, I'll go to the right side over here. You can see the right side over here. This is a little accordion button, and the accordion button gives you the ability to look at all the different assets, and you can see what's going on with each one of these assets, and can also get a snapshot view of a particular asset. So if I click on a particular asset, I can go into a particular asset and see what's going on with that particular asset, and I get the metrics off of that asset, see some analytics, some alerting, some maintenance on that asset. But and then at the bottom down here, you'll see what's known as the gut, and it's really the update tray. It's the update tray that's kind of key and important to you because it tells you what's going on right now with these particular assets. So if I'm looking at how I'm going to set up and build a optimization report, or how I'm going to get access to an optimization report, first of all, I would go in and set up a location, and if I set up a location or set up a zone, so I'll go in and pick a location. So if I look at one of these locations and said, let's go down and pick one of these job sites here, that's a location, let's see which one we'll pick here. We'll pick one here and see what's in that group. Here's a particular location. that we have, and that's a location that's being prepared for some future work that's going to be done on that particular project. So now what I would do in that case is I would set parameters around building a geofence. Once I set that geofence up, I would be able to determine any time an asset that moves in and out of that geofence, I would be able to calculate engine hours and get runtime on what's going on that particular asset, and then be able to serve that up in a particular project. The same here, I'd be able to look at it in a different way. So when you first go into setting up of how you want to capture what an asset is doing, or what an asset is, how an asset's been performing over a period of time, you would set up a geofence to capture that. And then once you set up that geofence to capture that, you can also go in and set up the parameters around that. So I'd go in and set up the parameters around it, and I'm going to do it by engine. I'm going to do utilization by asset, or if I wanted to look at job utilization, I could do that as well. So let's look at job site utilization first. So if I pick a job site, I'm going to have a job site report that would run, and across the top here you'll see different options. I can pick different groups of equipment, I can pick assets, and I can pick projects. You know, one of the things that's kind of neat about this is that if I wanted to just look at engine activity on runtime activity on just my loaders, I could go in here and pick loaders and pick that group and pick a period of time and pick all the locations and run a report on all those loaders so I can see what's going on those loaders. Or if I wanted to do it on, everything in the company, I can go in and select the entire company, and I can pick what's going on in the entire company. So I can run total asset reports. So there's a couple different ways you can do that, but I think that one is kind of it's kind of unique to think about it. If I look at groups here, and let's look at these particular groups here. I'm going to look at these large excavators right here. And if we look at a range, I'll go back and look at last month. And if I select all the groups, let's see how many we have in this one that'll run in that report. We will pull up a utilization report. So now I have a job site utilization report for my large excavators. And as you can see, I can look at each one of these locations, and you notice in the little snapshot screen that I showed you back earlier, I showed you where I picked up just for that particular job site. And that particular job site was that BNSF railroad project, the over project. So if I'm the equipment owner or operator and I want to see what's going on, I'm now looking at just a group of excavators. But the flexibility in the solution allows you to look at just a group of excavators. I can look at any group, I can look at any subgroup, and I can set any range or time on how I want to look at those assets and track those different assets. And then also I can export these documents out. So I can send this document out. Once I spin this document up, I can send it out in a PDF and Excel, or I can, do the old hard print copy on that as well. But if I go back to, let me go back to the report again. If I go back and looked at it in a different way, I will deselect all here. Let's go back to deselect here. Let's go back and look at engine hours by asset. If I was looking at performance by asset, once again, you can see on the top up here, I have lots of different options on how I want to capture that, but I can capture engine hours by asset, or I can select all. And if I won't run this one because it's a long report, but just to show you an example of it, of being able to create a runtime report for all engine hours. I can tell what's going on for a particular range of time. So an end-of-day report, for example, we have some customers that run end-of-day utilization reports. We have customers that run it by job, And we have customers that run it by entire fleets to capture that utilization. So the underlying message here is that you want to try to understand that the flexibility of thinking about every piece of equipment that you have on a job site, that has a telematics control unit in it, has all the same data, and there's a tremendous value in being able to carve that up and serve that up in varying different ways. And not only can you run all these reports on the fly, you can schedule these reports. So, for example, here, if I go in and want to schedule a report, I can go into the schedule reports section. I can drop down and I can say, okay, give me the job site utilization report. I can pick any of these groups. I can pick the assets. I can pick them by groups. I can pick them by projects. I can pick them by drivers if I had drivers on their company. I can select those groups, and if I look at my the backhoes and loaders, I can go in and spin those up. I can select all the locations, and then I can go right back up and say, how do I want to see this report? Who do I want to send it to? You can add up multiple emails and addresses. I can put a report title on it. I can send the frequency of how I want to see it. And you'll notice how intuitive this is when you click over here and say, I want to get it on the month, I want to get it on the 15th, or I want to get it every month. All easy windows to be able to click down, and I got a little pop-up window right here that comes down. Let me pick those screens. So very intuitive and very easy to use in terms of being able to get to the data on how you want to see it. I won't save any of those because I'm looking at these, but if I looked at some of these and said, if I go to this one and said I want to edit this daily engine report, I notice this customer here is getting this daily engine report. So he's got a schedule set up, and you notice here the date and time, the range, of when he's sending that report out and what time he's getting it. So he's getting that report that's being spun up, every morning, and he'll see what's going on. So it gives you a real quick snapshot of, how to use that tool itself. So that's kind of a quick overview of how to use, a job site and utilization. I think the thing that you should think about is there's a couple of simple steps in being able to use this tool. And one is, define the metrics of what you want to capture. So if you want to capture something around a site, then build a geofence around the site. And if you want to capture something around a group of assets, set the assets up in a group. And then if you want to set it around the entire company, just go in and you click the drop downs on what you want to capture, and then think about, what range you want to capture it in, and then you'll be able to spin up those reports in many different ways to be able to look at the data. So do we have any questions from any others on the group?
Doesn't seem like it.
Okay. Well, we thank you guys for joining today.
Yep. Thank you everyone for joining.
All right.
Thank you.